Se vi accomodate iniziamo. Francesco. Francesco. Niente. Neanche quei segnali di fumo. Ah, io riprendevo lui, non te. So, good morning, everybody. This morning we are talking about ETIP hydropower. We presented something also in the last edition, but today we will focus much more on the activities that we have carried out in the last year. And we will present you the next step also of the ETIP hydropower. So I will take a step back just to explain you why we decided to establish an ETIP hydropower. We have to consider that we are in a changing world where there are a lot of changing conditions and boundaries in the energy system. We know that Europe would like to become the first neutral continent based on neutral technologies. And so we are focusing our development on especially on non-dispatchable renewable energy sources. But this decision, of course, has some drawbacks, and in particular, there are the variability of this type of source is creating a lot of fluctuation issues on the power grid. So our power system had new needs, and to maintain satisfactory level of adequacy, safety, and resilience, we need the flexibility in power generation and also storage capacity to enable the time shift of the renewable energy production. And these two characteristics are typical of the hydropower sector. So we have the possibility to refocus the attention on this sector, and there are some values of the hydropower that it's important to make people be aware, and especially policymakers, because the hydropower could play a pivotal role in the energy transition, because it can contribute to provide the balancing services to the power grid, to stabilize the power grid. And moreover, is a very important, has a very important role also in the energy security of the European countries, because it can reduce the energy dependence on imports. This is not subject to fluctuation of fuel prices. And most of all, it's based on European technologies that are of our domain. And third, it's still the main renewable source that we have at the disposal worldwide, but also in Europe and many European countries. So it's a cheap, clean, cheap, and reliable energy. But we have to consider that our assets are aging. As I told you, the energy system is progressively changing. So there are new needs of research, innovation, and development, also in the hydropower sector, although it was considered a mature technology in the past. So we were aware about these needs, and you have to consider that in Europe, the strategy on innovation technologies are governed by this set plan, Strategic Energy Technology Plan. And this is an instrument that Europe has at disposal to try to align each European and national research and innovation strategies, and most of all to foster the rapid and competitive development of low carbon technologies. So who are the actors of this set plan? First of all, the implementation working groups. So take in mind these implementation working groups because I will tell you something at the end of my presentation. So we have 15 implementation working groups that are focused on specific technological areas. They bring together specialists all around the Europe, from industry and academia as well. And they have the duty to develop a comprehensive implementation plans. And how they draw these implementation plans. They base their gathering of information on what we call the European Technology and Innovation Platform, so in short, ETIPs. And these ETIPs are 11 in Europe, and they bring together EU members countries, industry stakeholders, and researchers as well. And they promote the market uptake of strategic energy technologies by pooling funding, knowledge, and also research facilities. And of course, the implementation working group deal also with the European Energy Research Alliance, that is the reference in the research field, because it brings together and coordinates over than 250 research institutions. And as you can see in this European technology, and on this slide, we have plenty of ETIPs related on photovoltaic, batteries, bioenergy, wind, geothermal, renewable and heating and cooling. We have also an ETIP devoted to ocean, but up to 3 years ago, we have no an ETIP devoted to hydropower. So we decided that it was time to change. And an important step in the past was the funding of this Hydropower Europe project. We have here Jean-Jacques, that was one of the supported promoter of this project. And it was an important step because they issued 2 important documents, the Research and Innovation Agenda and the Strategic Industry Roadmap. Jean-Jacques will explain you the content of these 2 important documents, and they were these 2 documents define the priority research areas of our sector and outline the strategic action for policy and industry to unlock the hydropower full potential in Europe. After the ending of this European project, we decided to submit a proposal of a new project that we call ETIP Hydropower. The aim of this project was to define the structure of an ETIP Hydropower, so that we could ask to the European Commission to formalize and recognize formally this ETIP Hydropower. So the project it's almost at the end. We have created the structure of the ETIP. I will show you later it. And what is our main aim? To unify the voice of hydropower stakeholders. So we would like to build the European Commission vision on how the hydropower sector could provide support in the energy transition project, and also the services that it can provide for example, for the climate change adaptation. So we are very involved in identifying the priority of research and innovation needs about our sector, and we would like also to increase the flexibility and storage capacity of the hydropower plants, because these 2 services are extremely important for the energy transition. And of course, we would like also to address the environmental issues, because we must make these plants more sustainable. If you would like that these plants are much more considered also by the public. So what about the structure of the ETIP Hydropower? We have a general assembly, so each one could take part to this general assembly. In this, we have some meetings over the year, where we discuss the needs of in the research and the development of the hydropower sector. We have also created a governing board that is the strategic body of the ETIP Hydropower. So he is in charge to define the vision, the mission, and the strategic plans of the ETIP. And he will also review all the documents that are issued by the ETIP. Then, of course, we have the Secretariat. That's very extremely important because it's the organizing part of the ETIP, and they will pay attention about all the processes of the ETIP. And then we, of course, have a scientific advisory board that will ensure consistency and integration between different research sectors and groups of the hydropower system. Sorry. And an important aspect is that we also establish working groups that have to deepen some aspects, some issues that we consider a priority of the hydropower sector. And finally, we would like also to have a link, a direct link with the government, the national government of our European countries. So this is important to drive the choice of the European country and the development of our technologies. So, considering the governing board, it has been elected by the General Assembly, so we have the expertise of the governing board members covers some different aspects. So we have 5 representatives of the hydropower industry and technology, 5 representatives of the operators, of course. We have 2 representative of the small hydropower plants, because they are also contributing to the energy transition. We have 3 representatives of the designers, planners, and project developers, 2 on finance, business, and insurance as well, and 5 representatives of the research, innovation, and development, so we have also the academia inside, and 3 representatives of the environmental and civil society. And we have also representative of the scientific advisory board. Sorry. So in total, we have 26 members. The chair is Denis Albrecht from EDF, France. I'm a co-chair, one of the 2 co-chairs, together with Peter Stettner from Antritz. I would like to show very shortly a tool that is available on the hydropower website. That is the Hydropower in Europe Research and Innovation. It's a very nice tool which gathers a lot of information related to research action that are ongoing or the past one, research organizations that are involved in this sector, and the research fundings that are available in each national countries and in Europe as well. So I just show you a slide, some example of the information that you can find in the research action. So there are some information about the past and the actual European project. For example, we have the Rehydro project that is ongoing. And then we have information about the research organization that are dealing with hydropower. Of course, we have part of this, RSE, and about some research funding. So national fundings, but also European fundings. And also in this case, if you click on this tail, you can get some information about this. And since 2023, we are promoting each year the Hydropower Day. So our aim in this case is to discuss the opportunities and the barriers affecting hydropower deployment. And they are collecting a lot of experts, and it's important that we are organizing this Hydropower Day in Brussels, because in this way it's easy to have or to involve the European members. So we can speak directly and discuss directly some issues about these technologies. And with the, starting from the research and innovation agenda and the strategic industry roadmap, we discuss with our General Assembly, and we find out the priority of research in hydropower. So we decided to establish just 1-2 years ago 3 working groups, so to consider the relation between hydropower and the flexibility and the storage services, biodiversity and climate change. And later on, we will there are some colleagues that will present. They will present what we have done in this year on these topics. And the most important thing is that they are releasing some white papers and some videos that have the aim to communicate effectively some key messages on these 3 key topics. And finally, we have a working group that is an overview on the past and current European research and innovation project for hydropower. What are our next steps? First of all, we would like to develop and submit a proposal to manage the secretariat, because the funding of the ETIP HYDROPOWER European project is almost finished. And so we need to define a structure to continue the activity of the ETIP HYDROPOWER. So it's important to maintain the rule of a secretariat, to involve people in the secretariat to effectively continue our activities. And we are discussing about the possibility to submit a cost to fund this secretariat for the next 3 years. And most of all, we would like to establish an implementation working group entirely dedicated to hydropower, because we have seen that the definition, the development of the strategic energy plan of Europe is based on this group. So it's important also at the top level, not only at the level of ETIP, to have an implementation working group to be much more effective in driving the development in Europe from a technological point of view. So that's all from my side, and I would like to ask Jean-Jacques to talk about the next presentation.
Thank you, Antonella. I am Jean-Jacques Free, and in a few words, I want to introduce me. I am a civil engineer. I worked first for UNDP in Africa, and then 37 years for the French utility, EDF. And during that time, I was the General Secretary of the French Committee on Large Dam. I was as well associate professor during 20 years in a school. And finally, I was president of the European Club of High Cold. And in this position, I tried to catch some funding from European Commission. And with success, we constitute a consortium only with international association, and we win a bid, Hydropower Europe. The objective was to gather the stakeholders of hydropower and to propose to write a research and innovation agenda and a strategic industry roadmap. So you understand that I am here like an advocate for ETIP and like a great father of ETIP. So now I would like to discuss the question, what are the main barriers to hydropower development in European Union? You know, the generation in Europe is almost constant. We have equipped 2/3 of our economically feasible potential, but it's difficult now to tap the last one. However, we see that country by country, there is a potential of hydropower development. You could see on this drawing that a lot of countries have more than 50% of economical potential not yet tapped. And you see now this share of hydro in electricity generation. For example, in Italy, you have well-equipped the country. But now the question is to tap for the energy transition. There are several reasons impeding the hydropower development. And the first barrier is certainly the environmental impact. Look at back in the past. In 2000, the World Commission Dam released a report. It was criticized because it was not really objective. And the conclusion of this report was, do as we want, but if you can do other than a dam, go ahead. In fact, the method used for this report were not correct. And some people were paid to be in protestation against them, and 2 experts of high code were paid as well. When it was known, it was a huge scandal. And one of these experts died 2 years after, caused by cancer. So it was a bad period. And at that time, the sector was divided in 2. People willing to increase and improve the environmental impact, and people from the third country saying, no, we have to go on, and this is a strike against our development. More serious report was the Water Framework Directive. This implementation has led to strategic planning and permit reviews aiming to integrate water and energy policy, safeguard biodiversity, and manage hydromorphological impact. Thus, it was estimated that it led to a potential reduction about 1.5% to 5%. But the conclusion is that directive promote sustainable hydropower development, and now this is irrecoverable. We have to do only sustainable hydropower development. In 2018, the International Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem show that there is a dramatic drop of some species, and especially fish species. And recently, last year, in 2024, you have the Renaturation Directive prioritizing river renaturation to improve river habitat biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. So with these important legislative directive, we need innovation to overcome this barrier. Another barrier is public and politician awareness. On this drawing, you see the number of organizations registered as interest representative with European Union decision maker and official. You see the increasing number, and now they are 11,800. And how many organizations for dam? No organization for dam. And for hydropower, how many? 2. Electric and at that time, the organization for small hydropower. You have 3,160 NGO working to prepare the next directive at European Union. So, this is an example of the NGO lobbying. The 2020 WWF manifesto, no more hydropower in Europe. It's time to explain. First, hydropower is absolutely necessary to mitigate the externality of wind and solar energy. It's incredible. Usually an industry pays for these positive and negative externality. And here, wind and solar don't pay for the negative externality, the high viability of the power generation. And that's the role of hydropower to pay that. How it is possible. And secondly, we have to demonstrate that reservoir will protect biodiversity in a context of global warming. We say diplomatically climate change, but that global warming damaging the biodiversity. A third barrier was the low price of electricity. Up to 2020, up to the COVID, you see the price were very depressed. And arrived 2021, Putin cuts the gas transport in Europe. And 6 months after, he invaded Ukraine. So you see that the consequence on the price of electricity. And now, fortunately, the price decreased, and the price are double that it was before 2020. But the issue is flexibility and storage are not paid or not enough paid. So the next question is how hydropower can overcome this barrier. The first action is to do dialogue with the European Commission. And the good level for economic and technical discussion is the Integrate Strategic Energy Technology Plan, the SET plan. The SET plan informs you of your energy and research strategies and new legislation you require. And to discuss, we need a place, and this place is an implementation working group. Antonella showed that there are 15 implementation working groups. All energy are in this implementation working group. Batteries, carbon capture, concentrate, solar thermal, geothermal energy system, nuclear, ocean energy, offshore wind, photovoltaic, bioenergy. But you have no hydropower. How it is possible? So it's why we are demanding this implementation working group. We hope to get it at the end of the year, but it's not certain. So in this new implementation working group, we will promote the research and innovation ideas coming from our university in order to develop industrial strategy. And we will be advocate of this research strategy and legislative proposals in the ETIP. And now, the action 2 is to increase public and politician awareness. We have a lot of excellent advantage of hydropower. Excellent low CO2 emission, excellent energy gain and payback factor, excellent efficiency, excellent flexibility, in-country independent energy, particularly in this international context, climate change mitigation, climate adaptation by providing flood and drought protection, and supporting the United Nations Global Sustainable Goals. For instance, you see on this drawing that hydropower has the best climate indicators, one of the best, lowest global warming potential, and the lowest impact on the stratospheric ozone layer. Moreover, hydropower is the best renewable energy for reducing pressure on mineral resources. You could see here. Action 3. We have to increase funding, implementation, and dissemination of research and innovation. We have 3 working groups which can identify research and innovation priority action. They will be presented after this conference. And we have 1 working group disseminating research and innovation results. It will be presented as well. We have the ERI platform presented by Antonella. ERI stores information regarding research action, research organization, and research funding. You have here the web address. And we have our research and innovation agenda. It was disseminated in 2022. It addressed challenge and defined prioritizing research and innovation needs for hydropower development in Europe up to 2030. A total of 78 detailed topics, gathering 18 research themes and 7 thematic groups address the challenge with the European hydropower sector. You have a look now on these 7 thematic groups: increasing flexibility, optimization of operation and maintenance, resilience of electromechanical equipment, resilience of infrastructure and operation, developing new emerging concept, an environmental compatible solution, and finally, mitigation of the impact of global warming. Now you could see the 18 research team of the research and innovation agenda. We have no time to go through all these research themes, but you could see first the priority of this action, or they are very high, or high priority, or medium priority. You can see the urgency of this research action before 2025 or before 2030. And finally, the recommend funding scheme. So, what are the results? We gave this research and innovation action to the European Commission, and in fact, we need a budget of around 19 to 31 million euro per year. The current budget funded by the Horizon EU call is around 12 million euro. So you see there is a lack of investment between 6 million euro per year and 20 million euro. You see on the left of this slide the project funded by European Union, and on the right you see the lack of investment up to 2030. Only 10 of the 78 topics have been covered by the Horizon calls. So what we can do? Most of these topics will not be found in 2030. The huge lack of investment is between 60 million and 200 million euro. So the sector has to find this amount in-kind funding. What does it mean? We need collective research and innovation project. You see that the cost of any project is between 2 million and 25 million of euro. So any company motivated by this research project will pay this money. But if you have 5 companies motivated by the same project, so for funding, they need only to pay 1/5 of this amount. So you can see that by paying an annual registration fee, this company could have a large saving of their research and innovation budget. So, to increase funding and of research and innovation, we have to enhance the role of European thematic alliance. We have to foster global innovation ecosystem partnership and provide room for self-organization and entrepreneurship. You say, that's theoretical. How we can do that? We can do that in Europe because it works in America. Look at that. That's the Canadian Energy Association and Technology Innovation. You see, this is not a Canadian organization only. You have a lot of countries around the world working in CEATI with collaborative projects. Myself, I joined the CEATI in 2000, and during 16 years, my boss agreed to send me in America in order to do some research saving, some research funding saving. For instance, I work on this 11 research project, and I only spend less than 1 million, and all these projects cost 10 million or more. So you could see that company could do large saving with collaborative project. But if it works, why we have to leave CEATI? We left in 2017 because CEATI projects were more and more focused on small US utilities. Development and needs were driven by US regulator, the FERC. So it's why we need in Europe that European utilities could work together, focus on European regulation in order to improve for instance, to decrease the environmental impact, to improve dam safety, and so on. This kind of cooperation is a cornerstone for a successful energy transition of hydropower. My final message is, first, hydropower was forgotten. ETIP can be the voice of hydropower through an implementation working group to discuss with the European Commission. EU funding for research and innovation is not enough. We need collaborative research and innovation projects. And to do that, ETIP could launch such research and innovation collaborative project. Grazie per votre attenzione e arrivederci sulla piattaforma ETIP Hydropower.
Thank you, Jean-Jacques, for this comprehensive vision about the barriers and also the future activities in this hydropower sector. And I will call here the next speaker, that is Leonardo Nibbi from Università di Firenze. The floor is yours.
The video starts, I hope.
ETIP Hydropower Working Group 1 focuses on hydropower's role in providing grid flexibility and energy storage. Imagine Europe's electricity grid as a tandem bicycle. Electricity generators push the pedals, increasing speed. Consumers apply brakes, decreasing speed. To keep the bicycle turning at a constant speed, a balance between the force applied by cyclists, power, and the braking force of consumers, also known as load, must be maintained at local and European scales, while the bicycle is working at all times. Flexibility is the capacity of the generators and some consumers to adapt the force applied to the pedals and brakes to control the speed of the bicycle. Historically, thermal power plants like coal, gas, and nuclear, as well as hydropower plants, handled this job. Such plants can change their power accordingly to maintain the bicycle's speed, that is, flexibility. Here, hydropower cyclists are special because they can change faster than others, and all without carbon dioxide emissions and with no fuel costs. Recently, the bicycle has happily introduced new cyclists, wind, and photovoltaics. Like hydropower, they can push the pedals without carbon dioxide emissions. However, these cyclists have a drawback. They push the pedals only when it is sunny or windy, in a variable and unpredictable way. Therefore, the other cyclists need to be more dynamic, flexible, and adjust their effort faster to keep the bicycle at constant speed. Now, the various forms of hydropower generators are especially valuable due to their high flexibility and storage capacity. Pumped storage hydropower can even act like a battery pack for the bicycle, storing surplus electricity. These already exist across Europe, and there is need and room for more. The working group aims to highlight hydropower's value while addressing key challenges by demonstrating hydropower's flexibility and advantage in ensuring a stable energy supply. Most hydropower plants can even restart the electricity after a blackout, highlighting hydropower's contribution to grid regulation and stability, and showcasing hydropower's multi-purpose benefits like supplying water for drinking, industry, irrigation, and flood control.
Okay. So this is one of the two products of the working group 1 on flexibility. Thanks to Zabala and all that produced the video, and thanks to the work of the whole members of the working group on flexibility who provided the ideas and the script, and that is the result. So I think, and this is more or less what we also tried to reach by the white paper that I'm going to introduce to you quite quickly. That is clear message that can be understood by politicians, by decision makers, and to really say what already Jean-Jacques presented, the role of hydropower that is really set apart from all these discussions. And I will just present, a very quick hydropower, ETIP hydropower introduction that has been already done by Jean-Jacques, then talk about the white paper, and yes, to have later a discussion. You already know, you have already heard about this, and we have the structure, the secretariat, etc. So this is already discussed. And we have 3 working groups and 4, but the more technical, I would say, are 3 working groups, and I worked in the hydropower role for flexibility and storage working group. Each of these working group has developed a white paper. Some are already issued, just like our and videos, and they will be all published within the end of this year. So this is me. I'm a grant researcher at the University of Florence of the Interdepartmental Center for Research on Renewable Energy that is active since 2005 at the University of Florence. We merge several departments covering more or less all the topics of renewables. I am working on the integration of renewables. We work a lot on this topic with more or less all the renewables. And so the context it is that in the next years, the studies, this is related to a study by JRC, the increasing of the so-called variable renewable energy sources, that is mostly wind and solar, that also have issues they're also called IBR. So, the increasing penetration of these renewables will increase the need of flexibility. And this work from JRC point out that flexibility on all scales at the European level will be in 2050 around 2,000 terawatt hours per year. So there will be a need of energy into the grid that will be extremely flexible of around 2,000 terawatt hour. That is a huge amount. The flexibility is the ability of an electricity system to adjust to the variability of generation and consumption patterns and to grid availability. We have several different time steps in which the flexibility is considered and operates. So we go in the short term, that is what happens to balance the grid in the immediate, and up to 1 hour and more or less minutes and hour. Then we have the medium term flexibility, that is the one that stays in between 1 day, and then the long term where the storage plays its major role. And flexibility is provided by hydropower, is provided by thermal power plants, but we know that the fossil thermal power plants must be more or less, must be phased out up into 2050, and also the nuclear power, that is another greenhouse gas neutral energy source, that whose flexibility is in general less and more in the direction of hours and days, so no flexible generation in the very short term except for inertia. For the storage, presently we have in the very short term a big prevalence of batteries, and I will show a couple of slides about this. Pumped storage, pompaggio for the Italians, which we have more or less in Italy 7 gigawatt of pumped hydro storage installed, 40 gigawatt in Europe, and also incredible increase in China in the last years. And then for the long-term storage, what is really forecasted at the global level, it is the power to X, so exceeding power to produce hydrogen, and then through CO2 Sabatier and having e-fuels or other solution. Okay, but this is not yet mature, although the technology, the theory is more or less developed. It's the commercial level that is not really fully mature for this. Just a couple of slides for those who are not really in the topic. So the flexibility of a power system can be divided in three main typology. One is the downward flexibility. So when we have too much demand, there are more or less two solutions. Or we shed the load, either we shed the load or we increase the power plants and the power on the grid. Then there is the shifting flexibility. That is when I have too much power energy on the grid, I store it and then I use it later. Okay, this is the role of batteries and of pumped hydro storage in our case, the most. Okay. Then we have the upward flexibility, that is when we have too much, and this is something that is really happening even more often, that we have too much solar, too much wind on the grid, and then it overcomes the load, and then we have to, in some way, either curtail or increase in the demand, and we go in the direction of the demand side response. Or in other cases, it is to store. And the storage is one of the four pillars of the flexibility. So we have energy storage, and in our case, when we talk about hydropower, it is dams, or better in some cases, the pumped hydro storage. Then we have the demand side management. We have a flexible conventional generation, and here also hydropower plays a role, although it is mostly played by turbogas, okay? And then the grid extension. Another important part of flexibility is the inertia, the synchronous inertia. Synchronous inertia is the capability of the rotating masses of the machine that are connected synchronously to the grid to store their kinetic energy, and at the moment that there is a very strong drop into the frequency, to use this kinetic energy, even if the feed of combustible, for example, fuel, is not too much, it brings and it maintains the frequency on the grid until the something happens in terms of milliseconds or seconds on the grid, and the very first reserve are put in action and restore the grid, avoiding to go under the frequency load shedding. And this is a explaining graph from EPRI in 2019, where we see that the higher the inertia that is available on a grid, and the higher, the longer the time that the system has to be able to respond to any problem on the grid. And we have seen in April in Spain that there has been problems that have brought to the blackout, and I will show also a couple of slides about this. So we prepared the white paper. It was written by the working group 1 members, 75 members, and we collected the information. The idea, it was, it's 6 pages if we don't consider the cover and all the references and the other part. It's more or less 6 pages that condense the contents of and the work of the group in a simple and clear way, and to bring the message to the widest audience, and especially to decision makers, okay? And the hydropower's role, it has been put into evidence with also a couple of examples, especially of pumped hydro storage. And one of these that was taken as a more or less a reference, and it's very interesting. And those who has the opportunity go and visit this fantastic plant, I would say. That is the COP2 from Hilwerke, VKW. And since 2008, this is a pumped hydro storage with a ternary group and short circuit. And that has more or less 100%, nearly 100% flexibility, both in generation and in pumping, okay? And the flexibility in pumping, the flexibility in generation is usually not such a problem. Even all the standard hydropower plants, the flexibility in the pumped mode is always a big issue. For this, there has been developed several new solutions. That means variable speed pumps, binary sets, pump turbine, or ternary sets with a short circuit, and that really creates the possibility to follow the load of the grid in a very precise manner. The same for Gramazon, France, another important pumped hydro storage plant with 8 reversible pump turbine units and 4 Pelton turbines that also give a very high flexibility of the plant. Which is the role of hydropower in the flexibility? With this matrix, we can show that hydropower, except for a fast frequency response, can provide, and not in all cases, in any case, can provide more or less all the ancillary services related to flexibility that are needed to the grid. Synchronous inertia, if we have synchronous generation, okay, because in the case of a variable speed, then using asynchronous generation or power control, this you lose, just like in the wind generator type 3 and 4, you lose the synchronous inertia, but there are ways also to correct this by synthetic inertia, so with the grid forming inverters. Then all the section of the frequency containment reserve, so the FCR or the automatic, the 2 automatics and the manual frequency are available. Replacement reserve, voltage, VAR control, that would have been very important in Spain in the blackout. The capability of black start, that if the hydro power plants can provide the black start capability, and the storage capacity that, except for run-of-river, reservoir and pumped storage, especially pumped hydro storage, can provide this ancillary service. We collected all this information. I will show you later a QR code where you can scan and go on the ETIP Hydropower website and download the working group 1, the white paper. The demand of flexibility is increasing. the flexibility also brings to operate with high flexibility. The hydropower plants is also an issue because most of our hydropower plants have been developed in the up to the end of the last century, let's say, okay? When we had more or less a very controllable power provision on the grid. And the stress, there was not such a big variability. That since more or less 15 years, 20 years, has increased on the grid due to the presence of solar and wind. And this leads to wear and tear of the machines. And this is an important issue. The hydropower is really uniquely positioned to meet the European flexibility needs in the next years because we have pumped storage, we have the possibility to fast ramp up, ramp down capacity from highly adaptable machines, and these are coming since some years on the market. And the hydropower, we have black start capabilities. That is very important, and I will show you an example. For this, as Jean-Jacques has already pointed out, we have to push on the policymakers on the market because we need research and development and innovation investments to foster the innovation. We need a level playing field with all the other energy sources, especially with the other renewables. Flexibility support schemes that are also good for hydropower, because as I told you, for example, there is a need at least of revamping the old hydropower plants in order to be more fit to the new scenarios on the grid. And there are also quite simple solutions, for example, that are coupling with batteries. There is a lot of work on this. Coupling hydropower plants with batteries can really dampen all the high frequency variation of the grid, and then to avoid all the wear and stress on the machines. Remuneration schemes should reflect the true value of providing flexibility as it increases operational costs and accelerate equipment wear, as I told you. And we need more EU regulation clear for hydropower, okay? And so for the white paper, we focused on the need of research and innovation, on the need of system planning, on the need of clearer policy and regulation, and then investment and market. I wanted just to show you a few slides that are not in the white paper, but just to better communicate which is the important role of hydropower. And I made, as you know, what happened, I think everybody of you knows what's happened on the 28th of April in Spain. There has been a big blackout in the whole Iberian area, so also Portugal. And the analysis by ENSOI and Red Electrica is still ongoing. We will have the final results at the beginning of the next year. But at least it has been published on the 3rd of October. It has been 5 days before that we issued the final version of the white paper. And it's clear that decisive role of hydroelectric power in restoring the Iberian electricity grid. Take into account that the hydro only, this is for Spain, not Portugal, okay? In Spain, hydro in terms of capacity installed, not in terms of energy production, is more or less accounts for 13% of the capacity installed. And there is a lot of PV, of wind. In the moment of the blackout, there was a lot of PV, especially in the south of Spain, running. The restoration process started a few minutes later after the event. I went through the factor report, that is the only official data that we have up to now, and I highlighted in blue the intervention of hydropower to restore the electricity. In some cases, there has been also some plants that were not able to, just like you see at 1525, the hydropower plants in Andalusia that has black stars capabilities, was not able to get into the frequency. But as you clearly see, even at a glance, that apart from the very, very first interconnection through the Pyrenees, or in the north of the Pyrenees, the Archia-Hernani interconnection, the role of hydropower was more or less more than important. Despite the fact that we have turbogas, that we have all these other possibilities, the hydropower was the one that really led back the grid to work. Another important thing that I wanted to point out, this is a review that I did 3 years ago, more or less, to understand the information about the inertia constant of a power plant are quite complicated to get, and also you have more of this, most of these that are from studies in the US, so you have to rescale with the frequency because they have 60 Hertz, and then so I had also a discussion with Giulia Matevosian on how to manage this. And from a physical point of view, the inertia constant represents the time that it takes for a generator that rotates at a rated speed to come to a full stop, while no mechanical power is provided and rated electrical power is extracted, okay? The best and the most and the highest inertia, so the higher the inertia constant, the higher the inertia that can be provided to the grid. The higher inertia constant historically is more or less due to the gas turbines, but hydropower is absolutely in line with the different dots, the different data from different paper or technical paper or sources, reliable sources. Wind and PV as now the type 3 and type 4 of wind have zero inertia. And also wind seems that even with GFL, so grid forming GFM, inverter seems not to work. PV can work, batteries work very well with this. But hydropower, synchronously connected to the grid, can provide inertia, very healthy for the grid. I just want to close with, because pumped hydro storage until a few years ago represented more or less 95–98% of the storage of electricity at the global level. In the last year, especially due to the regulation and investment in China, we have seen an incredible development of batteries. And this is the last year IEA report on batteries and secure energy transition. And in terms of capacity, not of energy stored, batteries are going this year to overcome, I don't have the last numbers, but more or less should have already overcome the capacity of utility batteries, okay, of pumped hydro storage. A few years ago, it was only a fraction. And you see here, in 2020, 10% was battery and 90% was PHS. And now, more or less, we are going to be more or less equal. Obviously, when we talk about batteries, we talk about something that is 1–2 hours of storage. Okay, so if you have 1 megawatt installed, you have 2–4 megawatt hours batteries, even the bigger. This incredible development has been led by several factors. And one of these was for sure in the last years, just to say how policy can work. In the last years in China, there has been a regulation that each big renewable power plant was put on the grid, they had to have some storage installed. And this has led in the last 3 years to this. And the cost for batteries is now in China with the standard Chinese, then bring into Europe, it's another thing. We have more or less down to 60 euros per kilowatt hour. If you go, if you go on Amazon and you search for a 15 kilowatt hours battery for home, only the battery is 116, 120 euros per kilowatt hour. We are very near to the cost of pumped hydro. That can be very variable because this depends on a lot of factors. Here is the factors are more or less clear. So, but in any case, hydropower can work complementary with pumped hydro storage and with hydropower storage with this, because batteries can serve as a support for the plants, for the hydropower plants. A small battery can dampen the variability of the grid. There are a lot of examples. One, it was in Flex Hydro, that I think Matteo will present later. At least we'll talk about this, I suppose. Well, and it is a very good solution, and the costs are very low. Okay, and so that's all. If you scan the QR code, if you have questions about ETIP, the working groups, you can contact Lee, that has done a fantastic job in coordinating all the working groups. And for our working group, Edward is for sure the best, but you can also contact me. So scan the code, and that's all.
So thank you very much, Leonardo, for the presentation. Did you enjoy the video? No? Yeah? Hope so, because I think that the idea to represent each sources by a biker is fantastic and very well representative of what is going on our grid. So the next speaker are two colleagues of mine, Andrea Abbate and Marco Tangi, and they are talking about, I think, what we could say it's the weak point of hydropower, so the relation with biodiversity.
No, presentazione dell'Arianna. Yeah. Esatto. No, perché iniziano da là. Okay, perfect. Okay. I think we can start. Okay. And now me and Marco, my colleague from RSE, Ricerca Sistema Energetico, we will present the activity that we have done with the Hydropower and Biodiversity Working Group in ETIP. Okay, we have made just an introduction that was already done by Antonella, Jean-Jacques and other colleagues, but I want just to comment this photo that was taken a few weeks ago. Okay, this is the dam of Alpegera. And as we can see, a dam is not only a wall, okay? It's not only an infrastructure, but it's an infrastructure that should interact with the environment that is in the surrounded, okay, of the photo. We can see, for example, the trees, we can see also the mountains, and it's not clear in this photo, but behind the wall of the dam, we have also the glacier, that is a glacier of Fellaria, that with his processing, with his melting, is able to provide the water in the dam. So what is important from the hydropower is only perspective, is also to take into account all the biodiversity that is starting to interact with this type of infrastructure. In order to highlight this part, we have made some white paper around the biodiversity topic. White paper is a very useful, let's say, instrument, as was highlighted by Leonardo, in order to deliver in a simple way, in a simple manner, a very complex topics. In particular, is very useful for policymakers especially, but also for common people that normally want to dig a little bit or want be to introduced into this type of topics. So we can start with the presentation of the white papers that were about the three main different topics. One is about the fish mobility, the other is about the e-flow and hydropicking, and the other one was about the sediment dynamics. Here we can see all the, let's say, team coordinator that were we have worked with us with the construction of the white paper, and mainly the working group was split in three different parts. Me and Marco, since we are working mainly on the sediment in RSE company, we have participated actively in the third team. But now I will present let's say, an overview of this type of white paper. Here we have the coverage of the white paper that is about 5 pages for each topic, and they will be delivered by the end of 2025 of this year. So we can start with the team A that work on fish mobility. Why is important fish? Because they are more or less the animals that can populate the water that is normally taken into account to produce the hydropower. we have made a sort of survey, okay, at the European level in order to spot which is the techniques that now are taken into account to solve this type of problem. That is very important, especially in the, let's say, large rivers that are located, especially in the floodplains around the Europe. Let's say, I don't know, big rivers such as Danube. In Italy, we have the Po. And so the interaction between the structure and also the population of fish is important. So in order to overcome this type of conflict, we have seen different techniques that are now starting to improve a lot the knowledge about this type of problem. What is important is that now there is an European regulation framework that more or less say something about how to deal with the fish passage implementation. And also there is some details about the differentiation of the techniques regarding the type of fish that are located in that particular place. What is important is that each case study, each, let's say, hydropower plant has his own history. So the techniques may be, the methodology may be the same, but the techniques that should be implemented locally may differentiate, okay? Because there are several, let's say, local drivers that may shift a little bit one technique from the other. This is an example of the techniques that are implemented normally in Italy are called scale dei pesci or something like that. And what is important are that across Europe there are three main important tasks that we will do. First of all, testing a new and improved fish passage monitoring technology, because the monitoring is the key information that we require in order to say, okay, this solution is good or not. We need to develop also the standardized or science-based fish protection implementation or guidelines, not only at national and local level, but also in order to comprehend the differentiation that we can see at the level of entire Europe. Okay, in Europe we have more or less 27 countries that have a different regulation regarding this type of topic. And then, of course, now the digitalization is becoming much more important. Okay, so also for the monitoring, so is a key instrument that can be implemented in order to enable a better fish managing of this type of topic. Okay. And here we have also some solutions that were described inside the white paper. We have some solutions that regards that are acting at the level of the plant, but also that are involved the construction of the turbine also. Then we can move to a topic that, especially in Italy, was very critical in the past years, but now, due to climate change, is rising again. That is about the environmental flow. In Italy, it's called flusso ambientale or minimo de flusso vitale. Okay. That is important because we need there is a sort of balance between the energy production and also the needs to maintain the environmental flow for especially the downstream part. As we can see, the presence of them can block, the passage of the water, can alter downstream the normal flow of the water. So we need to try to find a sort of trade-off between production and also to maintain the environment. Okay, at the level of Europe, the panorama is very complex, especially we'll go to this slide, and we have different type of implementation models, okay, that are starting from very simple hydrological rating that were used, for example, in Italy to estimate the minimum del flusso vitale, and then they move to a much more complex model that considering not only the hydrological and hydraulic rating, but also the habitat modeling that is sometimes quantitative but also qualitative, and then we have much more integrated methods that are, let's say, the desiderata for this type of analysis in this problem. Here in Italy, in Europe, we have several type of let's say, technology that were applied, this type of methodology that were applied. And we can see that there is not an homogeneity, okay? For example, we have a holistic approach applied in France. We have an habitat approach mainly applied, for example, in Italy. We have other approach, for example, hydrological applied in Poland or in Ireland. So there is not a common strategy in order to solve, to interpret, and to manage the in-stream flow. So what is important is to say, okay, let's say we are a European Union, we need to try a common technique, a common methodology in order to develop a common strategy on the in-stream flow management, because it's critical, especially as I said before, due to the ongoing climate change that is trying to modifying all the criteria that were, for example, established in the past for hydrological and hydraulic rating. Then we go to the last part, okay, then I leave the floor to Marco, that is about the sediment dynamics. Okay, sediment dynamics, especially in Italy, but also we have discovered that this problem was also experienced by other countries such as Austria and Germany. The sediment dynamics interacting with the dams was, let's say, a problem not taken properly into account until now that we have, especially in Italy, but also in other countries, let's say, an infrastructure that have important lifespan. So we are reached about an age of 70, 80, okay, from the construction of this type of infrastructure. So if we have a proper sediment management technique have not taken into account, okay, now we are facing with problem with the siltation of the infrastructure. And so the siltation can reduce a lot the storage capacity of this type of infrastructure. And as we have seen in the previous slide from Leonardo, the storage capacity, the maintaining of the storage capacity of the dam is crucial in order to maintain the flexibility and of the energy system. So what is important is now more or less, and then Marco will explain to you, we have the instrument, we have the techniques, so we have the, let's say, the methodologies that provide to us the possibility to remove the sediment, okay? But we have some problem in the, let's say, cost of this type of operation, the management of the sediment removed. For example, in Italy, we have the problem that up to now, the sediment from the reservoir are treated such as special waste, so cannot be reused easily. They should be stocked in a special place, and so the costs are not feasible, okay? So there are some problems that need to be overcome, okay, in order to maintain the capacity of this type of infrastructure. Here, okay, just a figure about the process that are involved. As we have seen, the infrastructure, the dams are the whole inside a basin, inside an environment, okay, so we need to take into account all the geological processes that are present in the basin context, and also we need to take into account also the characteristics of each infrastructure, because regarding the sediment dynamic, again, we have that each dam has its own case study, because there are several processes that could be done, especially also the sedimentation inside the basin. So the take-home message, more or less, are the message that I've already commented. So, for example, regarding the feasibility, we need the practical use of the model and digitalization. We need to improve the design of this type of infrastructure, and we need to have a strategic vision, okay? Because the effects are not immediately, especially we need to monitor it on the long term. Then, for environmental flow, we need a common methodologies across the different countries of the Europe, and also a strategic vision in order to preserve the habitat that are settled downstream. And then for the sediment dynamics, we need, of course, a balance between the ecological needs, but also the economics needs, okay, of the sediment management. And then we need also a strategic vision that should be done not only looking at the single, let's say, hydropower manager, okay, but an approach that should be considered at the level of the basin, okay, taking into account the different stakeholders that are working, that are acting on the same basin. Then I can give the floor to Marco about the, let's say, the part of the sediment dynamics that we have done directly in RSE. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Andrea, for the presentation. So as Andrea said, we focus mostly on sediment connectivity, which is our specialty here in RSE. And in this presentation, I will give you a basic idea on what we mean with sediment connectivity, what happens when sediment connectivity interacts with human infrastructure, and how can we mitigate these effects. And also, as a final topic, how is the European Union responded to this kind of problem. So, what is sediment connectivity? Sediment connectivity is defined as the connected transfer of solid material across a river network. Now, by itself, that doesn't tell us much, but once we try to understand and to try to quantify what is the sediment transfer, we find a lot of problems. First of all, it is a distributed process. That means that it is defined and emerges from different sources. And these sources interact across time and space. And as they are distributed, it's difficult to pinpoint an exact cause and effect of any changes we find. So in general, we can say that the river network has some areas of erosion where material is removed, solid material is removed from, some area of transport where it's just transported across the network, and some areas of deposition, usually deltas or river environments. But even this definition is not fixed. Imagine that, for example, an area of transport can become an area of erosion when we have high flooding, or an area of deposition can become an area of erosion again when we have, for example, movimentation of the river system or even high tides. And sediment transport is not by itself something we think about as important. That's kind of, and what Andrea was saying is often overlooked, but if we think about his role in the sediment dynamic, in the sediment and river stability, is actually a very important topic. Why? Because sediment transport a lot of material by itself. For example, it binds with nutrients, which is very important for the stability and the ecosystem value of, for example, floodplains. But also we see rivers that, for example, change shapes according to the amount of sediment which are coming from, or amount of sediment which is being removed. And then if we put everything, in all this complexity, we put a if you can imagine sediment connectivity as a machine, and we have, with our infrastructure, we put like a stick in the machine, a stick in the cogs. And of course, once the machine breaks and change, we find unforeseen consequences. For example, we can have sediment starvation. If we block the river, we block the sediment, downstream we will not have sediment. And this can have effect on, for example, aquatic ecosystems, fish spawning pools, or something like that. Reservoir sedimentation, of course, you block a reservoir, you stop the river, you stop the river velocity, we have sediment deposition, and this cause siltation in the reservoir. And of course, we have losses of delta land. This is a very important topic, which is, again, very difficult to quantify, because you can imagine like we have multiple reservoirs and it takes a long time for deltas to recede. But you can imagine that if the river not providing the delta with sediment, then the waves can start removing the material. Couple this with, for example, high tide and rising sea levels, and you can see that we have a huge problem, especially in the future of delta land loss. For example, the Mississippi or the Mekong River networks are expected to lose a lot of land. We're talking about probably between 20 and 30% of land in the next 30 years because of delta land loss due to sediment starvation. So these are just some examples of all the impacts we have caused by sediment conductivity disruptions. There are many more. Again, it's a complex system, but now we want to see what happened to our infrastructure, so to hydropower infrastructure. So how does hydropower interact with the river? Well, first of all, we have to see which kind of structure we're talking about. If we have run-of-the-river power plants, of course, we have removal of water from the river. That changes the hydrology and the sediment density. Again, you can imagine if we're removing water, we have more sediment in the water that remains in the stream. That could have some problem with for the fish species. For instead large infrastructure, the problems are typically more evident. One of these is clearly siltation. Reservoir siltation, so we have a loss of storage due to the fact that over time sediment are accumulating in the river, in the reservoir. We have foot erosion and problem downstream of the reservoir, because if you imagine water has typically has a capacity for transporting material, solid material. If the water is released from the reservoir, is usually deprived of sediment, so that we call it hungry water. It is hungry for material. If it doesn't have this material, it will find it somewhere. And that could cause locally erosion in the foot of the reservoir, but also changes in the shape of the river channels downstream. And typically we have way more erosion that could cause problem in the infrastructure downstream. We also have structural damages to the mechanical component and turbines. That's something that is very well known. We don't want sediment inside the water for the turbines, but the problem could also be that sometimes it's very difficult to remove old material from the turbines. And of course, something that is, again, is an overlooked topic, but is getting way more important as we're approaching the end of the life of main infrastructure, is the fact that sooner or later this infrastructure will have to be removed. And if they are filled up with sediment, there will be a huge problem what to do with this material, because if we just free it up, we will fill up the river. It's a very shocking experience for a river to receive so much sediment in so little time. Okay, so how do we manage this problem? I hope I give you an idea of why sediment connectivity is important. It's often overlooked because, again, it's a slow process. It takes time. It takes time for reservoir, especially if there's very big to fill up. And so it's kind of a climate change. If we ignore it, you will see the effect later and in a way more expensive and impactful mean. So how do we manage sediment? Well, there are a lot of ways. In this paper by Condolf, we have a simple classification. So if we want to protect our reservoirs, first of all, we have to maybe try to reduce the sediment coming from upstream. That's, again, very difficult because sediment distribution is usually, sediment transport is a distributed process, so there is not a single source of sediment. But we can do something. We can create, like, for example, stream bank erosion structure on the main channel, like, for example, small reservoir upstream of the main reservoir to fill up with sediment. we can, for example, minimize the sediment deposition. So that means that we allow sediment to come to a reservoir where we stop them from silting, so for depositing. So there are some methodologies, for example, removing by bypasses or just using sluicing or flushing to remove it through. Or we can recover this volume. This is the most classical approach. You can imagine, for example, one way is to completely empty the reservoir and remove the sediment mechanically. It's incredibly expensive, but it's one of the more flexible way to do this. We can do some methodologies, for example, flushing and drawdown flushing or dredging from without the need of emptying a reservoir. But again, a lot of methodologies. How do we choose which one is the best? Well, first of all, we have to define two different categories. The first one are structural versus non-structural measures. So a structural measure is something we plan for when we build a reservoir. So for example, the most classic one is to create a dead storage. So that means to create an area in the bottom of the reservoir which is the only purpose is to fill up with sediment, so we don't lose the actual storage, active storage. Another one could be to create a headwater structure upstream that is going to fill up with sediment, but from which is very easy to remove sediment from. So it gets cheaper to remove the sediment from the headwater compared to the main structure. Or we can do something more complex, for example, to create sediment bypasses, so a channel that divert flood water, which is very sediment filled, downstream of the reservoir, or just build the reservoir not on the stream but offstream. And then we have non-structural measures. This is something we can do to a reservoir once it's already built. Dry excavation is the easiest one. Not easy. It's very expensive, but it's the most simple to understand and to proceed, because it's very flexible, can be used for many reservoirs, which is basically empty the reservoir and excavating. Dredging means that to remove material when the reservoir is still full by using pumps and mobilizing the material which is deposited downstream, and then maybe using these geotubes to store the water-rich sediment, the water rich with sediment. We have other with like sediment sluicing and drawdown flush or sediment flushing, where we use the energy of the river itself to remove sediment. Of course, this division is not very flexible. For example, some drawdown flushing actually requires some structural measure beforehand. We have to create bottom outlet, but it's a good way to distinguish these kind of operations. But again, if we look back again, the problem is that sediment connectivity is a distributed process. So even if we actually do sediment management in one of our reservoirs, the impact will be felt across the entire river network. And then imagine expand this for a large river system where we have multiple reservoirs. Maybe we have different countries bordering on the river system. We have different operations. We have deforestation. We have industrialization, multiple barriers, other system of maybe, and then we have some natural dynamics, for example, landslide or flooding or something like that. It's a very complex system. And so it's very difficult to understand the consequences of our action across time and space. Now, let's go to the European common practice. So how does the European Union addresses this problem? So first of all, if you look at the Water Framework Directive, we see some mentioning of sediment, especially when we try to characterize the water body type, the risk analysis of the risk, and so forth, so on and so forth. But there is no common strategy. There is no common strategy, and sometimes there is not even if there is a strategy, is mostly localized on the infrastructure level, so on the dam level, or if the dam are owned by a single operator, to the complex of the entire complex owned by the operator. And there is also a problem, as Andrea was mentioning, of sediment disposal. So what do we do with this sediment? Do we release them back to the river if we want to remove them? Do we take it away and put it somewhere else? How do we consider sediment as a waste? Is it a special waste? Is it a waste that we can remove easily? It should be cleaned. The different way to manage this sediment actually will affect our cost and how do we proceed in this sediment management operations. Now, again, this is not completely wrong, because as we see, sediment connectivity is very dependent on the case study. So each case study, it's sometimes require a tailored solution to this kind of problem. However, if you look at Europe, we don't have even a connective framework for sharing best practices or efficient or effective methodologies to address this problem. So basically, we are left with a lot of differences in legislative maneuver. So for example, we have different level of legislation. We have some at the regional level, state level, at the level of the single operation. Maybe some of them are given by the single company and stakeholders. So a lot of confusion, a lot of different practices, and this lack of communication hinder our ability to address this kind of problem. Let's give an example. Sediment were labeled, in Italy, sediment were labeled as special waste until 3 years ago. That means that for 1976 to 3 years ago, sediment should have been handled like a special waste. That means an incredible cost in removing this material, and also a waste, because this material, even if removed, can be used for something more productive, for example, for creating a new banks, or for using for construction material, or creating parks, or for many other ways that, of course, if we consider special waste, this cannot be done. So our objective, to conclude, for the ETIP hydropower and sediment connectivity, for the sediment connectivity in the ETIP hydropower, is to create this framework of communication to share best practices for the operators in hydropower management. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea and Marco. The next speaker is another colleague of mine, Arianna Treviso, that is she's an expert on climate change.
Thank you, Antonella, for your kind introduction. I work in RSE, and I'm part of the working group number 3 of ETIP Hydropower, and I had also the pleasure to be in Brussels this year for the Hydropower Day. This is the outline of my presentation. I'd like to devote a few minutes to describe the scope and the work organization of the working group number 3 about hydropower and climate change. And then the second part of my slide is fully dedicated of the input for the work of this group that are the observed and projected climate trend in Europe, the climate impacts on hydropower, with focus on 3 exemplary case studies in Norway, Portugal, and Italy. And then I will try to draw some conclusions and outputs of the work. So the general scope of the working group number 3 is to establish and communicate, like the other working group, with an accessible language, what are the key issues in relation to climate change and hydropower, both in terms of risk, for example, reduction of inflows in some region and uncertainty on flow and extreme events, but also in terms of opportunities, the increase of inflows in some other regions. And also, hydropowers must be considered a multi-purpose tool to increase their resilience by preventing hydrological extreme events with reservoirs, or to enhance the stability and the flexibility of a power grid, which increasingly combines hydro, solar, wind plants, as shown by the videos of the group described by Leonardo. And another scope, part of the general scope, is also to illustrate issues with some representative case studies, and also to identify needs for increasing knowledge and develop solutions to limit climate change risk for hydropower and foster climate-induced opportunities. So the scope covers both climate adaptation, that is the resilience for hydropower system, and climate mitigation, the reduction of greenhouse gases emission. How is composed the group? We are more or less 40 technicians and researchers who are expert in hydroelectric sector. I'm my focus is on climate change. We are all volunteers. The group is coordinated very well by Benjamin Graff and with the help of Ibrahim Halil Demirel and Sylvia Richard. We are from a lot of countries all over the world. Here you see the flags. And we meet periodically since June 2024. How we organized the work. We start with a review of the climate change impacts literature about hydrology and water, hydropower generation, and we selected case studies and best practices. This is the first part that I will show deeply in the last part. These inputs are forms the basis of the work of three subgroups dedicated to adaptation, mitigation, and water energy nexus. The methodology applied by the groups are the SWOT methodology, highlighting strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. And the output is the new risks and opportunity for hydropower connected to the climate change, and will be soon published, the white paper and also a video, very, very nice. I'm sorry, it's not already finished, but in November we will finalize the draft and the video in the last, I think last meeting of the group. So I would like to highlight some very important issues about observing and projected climate trends. Let me start with the mean temperature. Here on the slide you see the trend of the observed trends in temperature in the last decades through the black line. On the left, all over the world. And on the right side of the slide, in Europe and Mediterranean area. If you observe the increase in Europe, the general increase that is all over the world is double in, no, don't work, is double in Europe. But are we able to reproduce and model these trends in black? The answer is yes. We can use climate models to model these trends. But if we consider only the contribution of natural greenhouse gases, the green line, we are not able to reproduce this trend, this increasing trend. We have to include in the model not only the natural, but also the anthropogenic greenhouse gases emission. You see here the orange line that can well reproduce this trend. And what are the consequences of this trend? Is a modification, in particular in the hydrological cycle, in the amount of the energy in the troposphere. So we have an increase in hot extreme, heavy precipitation, and droughts as a result. This is, for example, some images extracted from the European State of the Climate, published by the Copernicus and WMO this year, but refers to year 2024. Here on the left, the number of extreme events affected in 2024, the Europe. In the central part of the slide, you see a description with an histogram, so the floods with high to severe impacts on Europe, and the authors highlighted that the most recent 3 decades had the highest number of floods in the past 500 years. Projections indicate a continuing increase in river flood hazard in Western and Central Europe and a decrease in Northern and Southern Europe. Europe is one of the regions with the largest projected increase in flood risk. In the right side of the slide, you see the other side of the problem, the summer days and tropical nights, 2 indices that represented here in the diagram the trend of the hot extreme in Europe in the last 3 decades. So, as they are able to well reproduce the past, what do the climate models say about the future? If we consider scenarios with quite intermediate scenarios, numbered 4.5 here with the black rectangle, with a decreasing emission after the middle of the century, we have at the end of the century an increase in temperature all over the Europe that is represented here by the anomaly in comparison with the period 1981-2010. But if we consider the most pessimistic scenarios numbered with the called 8.5, the anomaly is more pronounced all over the Italy at the end of the century. So if we are interested to follow this anomaly by here in the diagram on the x-axis, and by month in the y-axis, from January on the top and December to the bottom, and divided the Europe in the three main areas, Northern Europe, Western and Central, and Mediterranean, with three different colors, here we can see that we have an increase, in particular in the second part of the century, of the temperature in the winter months for Northern Europe and the summer months in Western, Central and Mediterranean Europe. If we are interested in the precipitation for the hydropower, we see that in both scenarios, also the intermediate and the pessimistic one, we have a dipole structure with an increase in precipitation, in particular in Northern and Western Central Europe in the winter months, but a decrease of precipitation in the summer months. And this results for the Western and Central Europe in an exacerbation of the differences between the winter and summer condition for precipitation. If we focus on snow amount, we see that in both scenarios and all over the Europe, we have a reduction in the snow amount at the end of the century. And what are the consequences for our basins? The consequence is that we will pass from a snow-dominated to a rainfall-dominated basin, because in a warmer world, less winter precipitation falls as snow, and snow melting occurs earlier in spring, with a shift in peak river runoff to winter and early spring, an increase of winter discharge and decrease in summer discharge, resulting in an increase of the frequency of peaks and low flows, with higher peaks and longer low flow periods. But what about the natural water reservoir, the Alpine glaciers? These are the results of a recent paper that project a reduction in the Alpine glacier area between 80 and 90% at the end of the century in both the scenarios, with consequences and implications for water resources management, in particular during summer season. But what are the specific impacts on hydropower in Europe due to this expected projection? Here is an example of all over the world of the variation in the usable power capacity. So we see that our most hydropower plants are situated in regions where considerable declines in stream flow are expected, like in Central and Southern Europe, but an increase is expected for the Northern Europe. This is also confirmed, but a more recent study, a very extensive review of more than 200 studies about climate change impacts and, on energy system. A full chapter is dedicated to hydropower, and the result is for Europe a reduction projected both for Western, Central and Eastern Europe, reaching also 20%. If we are interested in hydropower plants, in reservoir plants, the number of dams in area with medium extreme level of risk of water scarcity, floods, flash water, biodiversity fragility is increasing, with the implication in particular for the safety of the infrastructure and also for the water resources management among sectors like agriculture, tourism and energy. So, because there are so huge differences between the Northern Europe and the Southern Europe, I like to show you three exemplary cases. One is for Norway, one for Portugal, and one for Italy. These studies represent the results for the Norwegian energy system by 2050. The authors describe 5 experiments dedicated to hydropower, modeled for the future, and divided Norway in 6 main areas. So here you see in the histogram that in most of the cases you obtain a projection of an increase in the hydro energy inflow reaching more than 20%. And what is the result of this higher useful inflow in Norway? We have an increase in flood with losses estimated of about 3.9 terawatt-hour. But with this type of climate change, we expect also a highly reduction of heating demand and slight increase of cooling demand that, combined with this increase of hydropower potential, can lead to a reduced energy system cost and also a lower investment in onshore wind and ocean, or maybe the export of energy will rise. Very different is the situation for the Portuguese electrical system by 2050, with a decrease in runoff across all regions and seasons, despite some spatial and seasonal differences. So the hydropower generation is expected to decrease of about 20–30% in the 2 scenarios, and with impacts more pronounced and stronger for runoff river plants than reservoir plants of about the difference is between 25 and 15 as a reduction. And what is the situation for the Italy that is a little bit intermediate? This is a study conducted by some colleagues of mine, RSE, about Italian monthly hydropower production. You see in the 2 graphs the monthly production on the y-axis, and on the x-axis you see the month. On the color you follow the evolution during the century from the blue now to the yellow, the end of the century. And the results indicate a relatively stable condition, but with a reduction on summer production in RCP the scenario 4.5, a pronounced decrease in RCP 8.5 with the peaks of reduction of 30% in summer, with a shift of the annual peak. That is the result that we expected considering the meteorological variables I showed you before. So for the southern Italy, it's projected to see significant decline up to 30%, and the northern Italy is expected to experience minimal changes. And what can we conclude about that? That the climate change may have 2 different types of impacts on hydropower. We have first direct climate-induced impacts regarding water availability for power generation, but also infrastructure safety. Because in a warmer climate, it is projected an increase of hydropower generation in Northern Europe and a reduction in Mediterranean Europe, less snowfall winter precipitation, and an early melting of snow, disappearance of glaciers and snowpacks, and an increase in extreme event, with a stronger impact on runoff river plants than on reservoir plants. And all these points are challenges for adaptation and mitigation. But we have also another type of impacts, indirect impacts, because we have an increased competition for water resources within the energy sector, like, for example, hydropower versus thermoelectric plants that need water for cooling, but also among economic sector, tourism, agriculture, energy. And we have issues also about transboundary water energy management among countries that are seated on the same basin, but also among different authorities and water energy operators that can be public or private. And all these points are challenges for water energy nexus. All these conclusions are included in the white paper that will come soon. But I'd like to show you in anteprima key takeaway messages of the white paper, because was the aim to provide some suggestion to cope with climate change. What can we do to adapt to this future condition? We can have a modernization and an infrastructure upgrades to improve resilience against extreme weather events and fluctuating water availability. But we have to optimize the operation to ensure the flexibility required by the grid and integrate photovoltaic and wind power generation to secure security and reliability of energy supply for the population. But we can also optimize the digital and predictive system with the real-time monitoring, hydrological forecasting system integrated in the management to enhance the efficiency of both power generation and water resource management. We have the possibility to manage in an adaptive manner the resource, because hydropower is are the multipurpose tools by developing innovative reservoir flow regulation strategies in response to seasonal flow variabilities. But we need an involvement of multi-actors, because a balanced approach between water and energy interests is essential. Hydropower reservoirs provide services that to the society by mitigating some impacts of climate change. Those services should be given a value. But we need also to have a knowledge based on science and data to integrate this climate information I showed you into hydropower and water-related physical and regulatory reference parameters. And finally, we need to enhance cross-border collaboration to optimize hydropower benefits and to mitigate risk in basing managed by different operators and sited over different countries. Thank you very much for attention. And if you have some question, I think we at the end. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Antonella.
Thank you very much, Arianna. And now I have the pleasure to have here with me Matteo Bianciotto, who is one of the key organizers of the Paris Pledge in Paris. So I know that you are providing us a very key important messages around that.
Thank you very much. Actually, let's see if I can use this one. Yep. Okay, great. So I don't have to get stuck here. So I will, the presentation will cover a couple of topics. First of all, my name is Matteo Bianciotto. I'm head of policy for the International Hydropower Association. And thank you very much for the invitation. So it was a pleasure to participate in this event. Thank you for having us here and giving us the opportunity to present a few things that we really believe of interest to understand where hydropower is going globally, but also on a European level. So first, I'd like just to go through very quickly some of the key findings of the World Hydropower Outlook. This is our flagship publication. Every year in early June, IHA published this outlook, which tends to describe where hydropower is going, what are the key trends, and how we expect it to evolve over the next 5 to 10, 15 years. So, first of all, very simple list of simple key messages. First of all, keep in mind, hydropower keeps growing. We have reached a total installed capacity in 2024 of circa 1,443, to be exact, gigawatt. This was given by a moderate growth in conventional hydropower, circa 16 gigawatt of new installed capacity in 2024. Keep in mind, this is slightly below the 5 years rolling average of conventional hydropower, which used to be set in the order of 20 gigawatt per year. Additionally, half of this new capacity came online in East Asia, a quarter in Africa, and South and Central Asia. On the other hand, pump storage is, we say, gearing up for accelerating its growth. It's closing the gap. We'll see more about that later in the presentation. And we think it could overtake the amount of installed capacity annually by 2030. So by 2030, we could be seeing more pump storage being developed globally than conventional hydropower. In 2024, 8 gigawatts of pump storage were installed and became operational, which is well above the average of the previous 20 years, which used to be set between 2 and 4 gigawatts. 4 gigawatts were really the years where we saw a lot of development, but we have more about that. It's not only something that we have seen happening in 2024, we believe this will continue also in the years to come, and we will demonstrate why. So very globally, very simple global statistic. As I said, 1,443 gigawatt of installed hydropower capacity. This includes both conventional and pump storage. China remains, obviously, the country with the largest fleet. We speak about 421 gigawatt. It's a big chunk of the overall installed capacity globally is in China today, followed by Brazil, United States, Canada, Russia, India, Japan, and Norway being the first of the European country in terms of overall installed capacity. Now, going back to the point before, from one end, on the left-hand chart, you can see the conventional hydropower. That represents basically how conventional hydropower, run-of-river and reservoir hydropower have been growing over time, year by year. This is the installed capacity in each of those years. And on the green line, you can see the 5 years rolling average. The worrying side here is, yes, conventional hydropower keeps growing, but it keeps growing at a rate which is well below its 5 years rolling average, indicating a potential slowdown in the process, at least in the short term, at which we will see this technology being developed. On the other hand, pump storage is picking up. It's starting from a very small amount. We know over the last 20 years ago, probably you would have heard very little amount of people speaking about pump storage at that point in time. It was mostly developed in Europe around the 60s and the 70s to support the nuclear fleet. And now suddenly it's coming back online as an important piece of technology because we need to integrate, as we said before, the large amount of wind, solar, that are being introduced in the power system. But also we are looking for ways to provide a long-term flexibility that is lacking to the system so much at the moment. And we see that trend. We see that trend, indeed, if you look from 2021 onwards, pump storage has been systematically growing at a rate above its 5-year rolling average. Now, in terms of progress towards 2050, we tend to ask ourselves where hydropower should be going. To do that, we look at IRENA, IEA projection that tends to describe how a net zero economy should look like in terms of power fleet, generation fleet. So if you look at the blue bar, let's start from the left-hand chart. The blue bar represents the amount of hydropower, conventional hydropower that today is available. On top of that, the light blue bar represents the pipeline that we have at the moment identified. Pipeline means project that IHA knows about, projects that have been announced, projects that are under development, projects that are under construction. And the big green bar above is what is left to be developed. So the good news is that to achieve the 1.5 Celsius temperature cap limit or the 2 Celsius degree, both those are indicated by IRENA and IEA, we have enough potential out there. There is enough hydropower to achieve those targets. And there is a big challenge because it needs to almost double up the existing fleet. So between now and 2050, if we really want to achieve a sustainable and decarbonized power system, hydropower needs to double up. The bad news is that the existing pipeline is far from being sufficient. That means we have a gap. We not only need to develop those projects, and most of these projects are slowly moving forward because of a number of reasons. Jean-Jacques in the previous presentation mentioned most of those. But on top of that, we still need to identify circa additional 5 to 700 gigawatts of additional hydropower projects. Let's really remain on the good note here, though. We know that the potential is there. And the potential corresponds to technically feasible, economically feasible, and according to the publication we looked at as well, environmentally sustainable, means outside protected areas. Now, going back to the climate point and the impact it's having on hydropower. Overall, we see the swinging performance of hydropower getting bigger over time. Every year we see a change in the way hydropower is producing, and this is clearly linked to the way the water availability at the moment during the year, throughout the year. That said, in 2024, hydropower was a generation, despite the drought that affected the sector globally, generated 10% more than the previous year. So it was overall a good year for hydropower. The key message here, I think, and the key point we should be thinking is that we have now, the fantastic presentation before made a very important point of what will be the impact on climate change. And it's coming, it's already here actually. Operators already know about it. What we need to focus on though now is not only how to mitigate that climate change, but also how to protect the productivity of the plants, making sure we can extract more value from less water. And modernization is obviously a key element in all that. Now, going back to the pipeline, and then here we are really looking at the green components, or the green part of the light blue bar. The blue, the chart I showed you before, trying to show where is the potential and what should be the target between now and 2050. Here we have what we call the pipeline. As I said before, these are projects we have identified that today have been announced, are either under permitting phase or under construction phase, okay? So you can imagine that moving from left to right, these projects are more and more probably coming online relatively soon. Obviously, the under construction project should be project that we expect to be online over the next maximum 4, 5, 6 years, if everything goes well. And obviously, the more we move toward the announced, the timeline get bigger and bigger. It could be decades, actually, right? Now, first point is that the pipeline is healthy. We have circa 1 terawatt in total combined between conventional and pump storage projects that at the moment have been identified. They exist. We know about them, and companies or developers are actively working on those projects to make sure that they will become reality. Half and half. 50% of this pipeline, more or less, is conventional. 50% of this pipeline is pump storage. Where we say that we see pump storage coming online very strong at the moment, where we see pump storage changing the rate at which we'll be growing over the next 5, maximum 10 years, is the fact that the under construction and the plan and regulatory approved, it's really strong. That said, you can see one important element is the color of those bars, which indicates where those projects are located. Indeed, the kind of red, dark purple color, the Eastern Asia and Pacific, most of it correspond to China. Now, this is a fascinating element that I always find to underline is China is the greatest producer and exporter of battery technology globally. We heard it before, we were speaking about the prices, but guess what is the technology they're most installing home? They have, over the next 5 years, we are sure that we will come online more than 100 gigawatts of pump storage. Potentially, this could reach even the 200 gigawatts of additional pump storage developed over the next 10 years. 5 years ago, this project weren't there. Maybe in Europe, we should start asking about a couple of questions about which technologies we're going to choose to store our power. China seems to have very clear idea about that. Now, because we link that to Europe. In Europe, we had last year a generation of circa 680 terawatt hour, 444 megawatts of new installed capacity coming online. Most of it was rehabilitation, modernization, small hydropower project. We have 187 megawatt of, sorry, I don't need to focus on that, 263 gigawatt of installed capacity for overall, and 56 of gigawatt, actually, not megawatt, sorry, here where I got confused in this infographic. There should be total pump storage installed capacity, 56 gigawatt in Europe, not megawatt. Now, let's look, this is the same exercise as before, is the pipeline. This is how the European pipeline at the moment look like. We have a lot of projects, and I say a lot of projects in the pump storage capacity. Sorry, I had to change the unit in this chart. They look very similar, but actually there is almost a factor 10 between the y-axis of these two charts. That tells us that in Europe, it's clear what's happening. What is currently being developed is pump storage. And we have almost 4 gigawatts that are currently under construction. We have circa 5 gigawatts that are planned, approved, and just waiting for the final investment decision to start really moving the ground, excavation work. And then we have 35 gigawatts that are planned, waiting for approval. That means roughly in Europe, we have what, probably circa 50 gigawatt of pump storage project that we have identified as IHA. And when I say that, I don't say that because I want to underline how good we are identifying projects, but simply in saying that there is much more than that. Because most of the utilities, how you know well, identify projects, then don't necessarily go out and start shouting around that. They keep it under their own hat. And this means that the potential to move pump storage forward in Europe and to deliver the energy transition using this technology is huge. There is no doubt on that. Let's break the argument that hydro is done in Europe. That's false, simply, because there is gigawatt and gigawatt of pump storage technology that could be developed and installed over the next 10 years. We're speaking about hundreds of gigawatts hour of electricity stored here. Let's imagine that in average, this could have 10-hour capacity, retention capacity. We're speaking about 600, 700, 800 gigawatt hour of storage capacity that could be delivered there. This is more than what we need. Now, as I said before, we are approaching the point at which pump storage could start providing more additional capacity. The issue that we see is that the pipeline is very healthy, but it's very healthy mostly when we look at China, which is responsible for 80% of the pipeline, partially Europe, Australia, India also, thanks to some very innovative and forward-looking regulation that are coming online, over the last few years. But apart from that, the world is quite stuck. It's not really moving and understanding yet this technology on a global scale. Okay, so this was a bit the introduction. I just wanted to give you this overview about the hydropower sector. As IHA, we are really keen on trying to provide and helping the sector understanding where we are going. Pump Power. This is a project that we have launched last year in cooperation with Eurelectric. It came, I give you a bit of a background behind that. It came after reading the Draghi report. Most of you might have read that report and have identified, I was reading that report, and what I noticed is that actually that report was screaming hydropower without saying hydropower. Never. It never says hydropower. It doesn't say it. That's scary from one hand. But on the other hand, it was saying, in Europe, we have a problem because we don't own the technology for the energy transition. Well, false. We have hydropower, which is the greatest, the most installed, the most productive renewable energy technology in the world. Apart from that. B, we have a problem with imported fuels. Well, hydro could solve that. We have a problem with very high electricity prices. Well, pump storage and hydropower could solve that. We have a problem because we don't have a supply chain. So each time we buy technologies, money ends up flowing somewhere else. Wrong. We still have a technology in Europe. We are 50% of the hydropower product sold around the world come from Europe. So after reading this report and seeing so many elements that were screaming hydropower, but then at the end the conclusion was not going there, with Eureletric we decided to set up this initiative called Pump Power, which was really meant to describe the role of hydropower in securing Europeans' energy future. The outcome of this project, of this work that we did together, was the Paris Pledge. The Paris Pledge basically was a paper that really aimed to do three things. First, explain to policymakers and scream loud, explain the need for pump storage and what are the benefits, not only from a power system perspective, but from a societal perspective as well. Bring together the European sector and have their commitment in delivering, in investing resources to identify this project, investing resources to train the staff, and make sure that we are ready to deliver them. And ultimately point out to the European Commission and member states, because we believe actually a lot has to be done on member states level. We keep looking at Brussels, and it's good. We need to keep looking at Brussels, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done on a member states level, probably even more. We have received over 60 signatures, over 60 companies and associations have supported this document. So basically, after having it prepared with Eurelectric, we share it with a handful of European utilities, we finalize it, and then we put it out. And we received circa 60 signatures. We can recognize most of the, European major utilities, equipment supplier, consulting firm in these signatures. What were the point we tried to make? So, first of all, we tried to explain what is the existing fleet. I don't go again through it. In the European Union, only here plus, so EEA plus CH with 48 gigawatt. This represents more than 90% of the electricity storage capacity, not installed capacity as we were comparing before. This is the electricity storage capacity. Because yes, if megawatt versus megawatt number seems very close, if you look them in gigawatt hours, numbers are still very far away. Orders of dimension separated from them. And I'm saying 90% because I couldn't really run an exact calculation, but I'm pretty convinced this is closer to 98 or 99 close than 90. The pipeline, as I said, is there, is noticeable, could deliver hundreds of gigawatt hour of storage if the framework is the right one. And there is even more potential. I invite everyone, I don't know if you know about that, there is a very interesting work done by the REN 100 group of the Australian National University. They've done a mapping exercise on it's a study, they created a map out of that. They try to identify sites and calculate what is the storage, the pump storage potential globally around the world. It's public, you can go online, consult it, you can select if you want to have included protected areas or not, type of pump storage, closed loop, open loop, if you want to look at the potential cost behind this project, and the numbers are huge. Select those numbers as you want, are huge. Few key facts in Europe that demonstrate why pump storage at this stage is necessary. Circa 12 terawatt hours of 12 terawatt hours of renewable electricity was curtailed in 2023. 12 terawatt hours is, once I try to run a calculation, if you assume a gas plant of circa 500 megawatt, it's more than 10 gas plant of 500 megawatt that have been running last year, in 2023, constantly, throughout the year, without delivering electricity to no consumer. This is the waste that in Europe today we have when we curtail the amount of waste, the amount of curtailed power coming from variable renewable energies. It's already huge. It costs 4.3 billion. This is not me saying, it's NTSOE. And this could raise further. If we don't take action, we just keep implementing and introducing variable renewable energies to the system, the number could go up to 118 terawatt hour by 2030. It's a huge number. We almost speak about the entire consumption of a medium-sized European countries here, wasted for no one. We know about the increase in demand, the flexibility. Leonardo presented it very well before. 3 times more flexibility by 2030, 7 times more by 2050. But also an important point is the sort of negative prices. Because the market at the moment is really not capable of understanding what to do with this extra power, and because of a number of other elements, including subsidies and lack of consumers' capability to absorb that power, we face more and more, because of the lack of flexibility, if you want, as well, hours with negative pricing, which are no good for the system. Because the more those negative hours go up, the more will be difficult to develop wind and solar. A business developer will stop soon pushing in wind and solar at the rate which we see them develop now if those number of negative hours will go up. Because those negative hours happens when? Happens during the day when wind, especially solar, is exposed to those pricing. And this will hinder dramatically the business model behind those technologies if we don't today create the infrastructure to absorb that extra power. The pledges. So first, this is a pledge. It's called Paris Pledge for a reason, because we really wanted the sector first to take a commitment. Before trying to send signals to policymakers, we really wanted to make sure that the sector was committing to focus on this technology. And the support we received was impressive. There is a section, I will let you at the end download if you want the pledge. It's a 10 pages document, so full of infographic. You'll find it quite pleasant to go through. It's not long. It's an easy read. But first of all, we need to develop the pipeline, keep developing it. Having identified the project is not enough. Utilities need to keep investing resources, capital, to make sure that those projects are well supported, well analyzed, backed up, and move through the pipeline from being simple announced project down to be under construction. This takes time and resources. We need research and innovation to improve not only the sustainability is written here, sorry, this was simplistic, but also make sure that that technology, the hydropower will remain relevant over time. We don't want to develop today a plant that is capable of delivering the service that are needed in this moment. We want today to deliver and refurbish plants that are capable to deliver the services that will be needed by the system in 2050. And that would be a completely different scenario. So we need really a forward-looking technologies as much as possible. Ultimately, we want to foster awareness of the PSH benefits and impact. We want to, the utilities and developers and the sector who have undersigned this pledge commit to involve local communities and policymakers in project development from early stage, provide serious evidence-based and transparent information around pump storage and renewable energies to the communities involved by those projects. Finally, on the other hand, though, we realize that the framework needs to improve. For those projects to be delivered, there is need for a policy support. The first request, we set two groups of requests, one for the Commission and another set for the Member States. The first one was really to propose a dedicated initiative to boost the deployment of electricity storage. And we were extremely pleased to see the announcement of the tripartite agreement. I don't know how many of you know about that. It's a new framework that the European Commission is currently developing that is really being designed to focus on storage technology development within Europe, which is a very good sign, we believe. Another important point was to consider the specific needs of long-duration electricity storage. And this is more of a global comments to everyone, I think. And I'm guilty, and IHA is guilty about that as well. We often refer to storage when we speak to policymakers, assuming that storage is a single, simple service, but it's actually not. We have seen it demonstrated before. It can be split depending on the timeline, depending on the time frame at which we are looking storage. We need to look at different technologies. So it's important that regulatory framework in the future will be capable of distinguishing what is the service that I'm really looking for? What type of storage do I need at the moment? What is the market at the moment developing? So what services the market is self-financing and finding the way to bring forward? And what services in terms of storage services at the moment the market is not capable of supporting? There I need to intervene on those specific. So the requirements and the needs of long duration electricity storage, the one that pump storage can provide, needs to be specifically addressed from a framework perspective. And then we need to ensure efficient market design, which simply means I think the European Union has done a lot of work over the last few years, especially with the market design reform in 2024, but also with the Renewable Energy Directive third iteration. And this still needs to be implemented on a national level. There is too much lagging behind between member states receiving this directive and then don't really moving forward in implementing. We are at the end. From a member states level, as I said, we require this unified and well-balanced implementation of directive from a European Union. So member state needs to take the action and start implementing the directive that they have received. System services, remuneration and revenue stabilization mechanism for long duration electricity storage. So if we look at the market effectively, what is really most of the time missing to make sure that a developer is happy to invest in a pump storage project is some form of revenue stabilization agreement. Something that gives the investor the certainty that in 20 years will be capable of paying back the installment of his loan and achieving a minimum return. When we see this type of mechanism being implemented, think about the capacity mechanism that is being now considered with the MAX in Italy, but also the UK adopted a different option, the cap and floor mechanism. The cap and floor has triggered a huge amount of development in the UK. Just the idea that the government was working on a cap and floor mechanism suddenly has generated something like 14 or 15 gigawatt of pipeline of pump storage project in the UK alone, which is not necessarily the most hydropower-driven country in the world. Remove double fees for electricity storage. In a lot of member states, double fees are still really penalizing a lot, damaging the economic of storage operators. And ultimately, we need to try to accelerate the permitting process, always making sure that only sustainable hydropower is developed, but also helping this company to gain visibility and make sure that we don't get lost in 5, 10, 15 years cycle of achieving permitting for a project that could have been probably authorized in a cycle of a couple of years, pushing it for taking even a very negative approach. This is all. Thank you very much. Oh, I didn't add the QR code. Apologies for that. I thought it was there. Anyway, if you want to download the Paris Pledge, you can just digit Paris Pledge IHA on Google, and it will be the first link you find. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matteo. I ask all the speakers to join me on the stage. So, yes, thank you. So, if you have some question, please. We have some times to answer to some questions.
In italiano perché mi è più familiare. Fornari, Enel, interessantissime presentazioni. Quello che ci rende un po' tristi è che siamo veramente in pochi a parlare di queste cose. E secondo me è un po' il quadro di una situazione, perlomeno italiana, che rappresenta quanto il sistema Italia sia attento a questi argomenti, quanto i tecnici siano poco ascoltati, pur rappresentando argomenti forti, no? E a questi eventi purtroppo ci raccontiamo di noi quanto il nostro lavoro sia rilevante, quanti argomenti ci siano a loro sostegno, ma chi decide non è qua. Chi ostacola lo sviluppo non è qua. Come fare noi, esperti di settore, a smuovere le acque, no? Perché se no la sensazione è che il sistema cammina in maniera inerziale, ma non siamo in grado di cambiare rotta. E ci dispiace vedere come altrove cose succedono con diverse velocità, succedono.
Well, I have to say that the decision makers are missing, but also the Italian operators, I would say, because I'm quite disappointed about the participation of this seminar. I'm in touch with most of the stakeholders and many Italian operators. We are always complaining about the lack of attention from the institution or the policymakers about the needs that we have in our sector. But when we are called upon to take part to some European initiatives, we almost disappear. I have to say, the Italian sector is missing in Europe. I can make reference to the ETIP Hydropower. Most of the colleagues that took part to the European working to the ETIP working groups are colleagues of mine from RSE. The others, there are no colleagues from the Italian sector that are taking part to this. And it's a pity because we are missing an opportunity. You know that ETIP is the actor to provide suggestion, information to the European policymaker to drive, to draft the next technologies innovation action. And we are not part of that. if you come to, if you take part to some other important initiative, for example, the ICOL Congress, also there the Italian operators are missing. For example, EDF, there are a lot of colleagues from the EDF that are taking part. They are providing papers, they are discussing about technical issues. No Italians. Why? I know that we have a lot of problems related to the concession, but it's not a way to close ourselves and not to cooperate, to exchange information with the others. We are losing quite a lot if you are not going to improve the participation in these European, national, European and international activities. And also we have to involve the young engineers. We are not doing that as well, because also in this case, how many young professionals are here? Only few operators have allowed their young engineers to take part of this. And also in this case, that's a pity, because it's important for them to improve their expertise, to get in touch with some European and international experts. So we have here Jean-Jacques, that is one of the promoters of the European, of the ETIP and other European initiatives. We have here Matteo Bianciotto from International Hydropower Association. And also in Paris. How many Italians were there? 2, me and Ezio Baldwin.
Italians, yes.
Yes, not more. So we used to complain, but when we are called upon to take part and to provide our effort, we almost disappear. So that's not only a missing action from the institution, but also from our side. I know that this seminar is recorded, so I hope this message will reach out to all our colleagues. Ezio.
Ezio Baldovin, Geotecna Progetti. I am leading a group which is following inside ETCOL the developments of pumping. So this is an initiative in order to create an attention about the subject. I would say that a certain attention exists, but probably we are paying let's say, the difficulty to obtain results, because for now, sorry, but I speak a little bit about Italy. We are in Piacenza, so so we had an instrument like MAXE, which in Paris was cited by several speakers as interesting approach. But what has happened, or what is happening? We have had a first ASTA in some weeks ago concerning the BESS, but concerning the pumping, there is no information about the intention. So, generally speaking, there will be something similar next year, as planned next year. But we have, let's say, a disposal of law which fixed by the end of March 2025 the establishment of the rules concerning the PSH. But after more than 6 months, nobody has let's say, done what was fixed in an Italian law, not just speaking. So there is probably this doesn't help to keep the interest on the matter. Anyway, I think we have to try to, of course, to continue this action because it is important to be convinced and to have the arguments to defend one thesis. But also we have to concentrate very practically on the subjects which we have to, let's say, influence at the political level. Because it was very interesting yesterday, the presence of the Minister of PNRR, but concerning PSH, for example, I don't know. I really don't know who are the offices which are implicated in a, let's say, in a practical form for the improvement. Because, for example, Terna is playing a strange role because it is the TSO, but in certain moments seems to be in favor of BES. So if he is a TSO, he has to be, let's say, at least part of the game, not to be on to prefer a certain technology because it is more simple and it concern less risk at the present, but not in the future. So this is generally speaking. One question to very precise to Mr. Bianciotto. You mentioned that between the request not to tax twice the grid, but I personally, I confess, I do not know what is this problem practically. Thank you.
Sì.
Can you hear me from here? Okay, great. Yeah. So the point of double taxation or double fees, because then some countries end up paying taxes, double taxes. Some pump storage operators in some countries pay double taxes. Some other cases are more simple grid fees. Let's take it very simple. What happened is that pump storage is actually at the same time a generation unit and a consumer. And what it happens is that it ends up paying fees, the grid, for instance, or taxes in certain countries as well, when it absorbs. So let's just say that it buys power when the market price is 10 euro per megawatt. And on top of that, there are 10 euros of fees cost, because it's utilizing the grid for doing that. So the overall cost of that power is 20 at that point. And then it sells it when it's 50. It's a good moment in time. I can make some hours at 50. I can generate a profit out of that. Problem is that then it pays again fees, because it's using the grid again, and it's again 10. So a margin that was supposed to be 30 euro per megawatt, 50 the moment it's sold, minus 20 the price when the power was bought and absorbed by the system, it ended up only generating 10, because there are 50s minus 10, minus 20, minus 10. So it ended up paying fees when it absorbs and fees when it resells. And we don't want to say pump storage should not be paying fees, but as it provides a key essential grid service, actually, it should be taxed and paying fees only once, whether it is when it as a consumer or whether it is as a buyer. This can be discussed. You know, there are certain elements of this legislation which each member state with his own player, with his own industry players needs to decide. But we really believe it's unfair for a technology that is providing a services to the grid to end up being taxed or having to pay fees twice. Because obviously, ultimately, that hinder the margin, and not only, it hinders the international competitiveness of those technologies. Imagine you are based in Austria, and you are with your pump storage plant, and you want to sell power and absorb power to Germany. You're connected, and you're actually operating almost on the same grid in certain areas. But on the other hand, a few kilometers away from you, there is another pump storage plant based in Germany, which only pays grid fees once. Automatically, you cannot compete against that plant because your national regulation taxes you twice or makes you pay twice fees versus the regulations of the neighbor country that is much more in favor of storage. So, and I'm not saying that, what I want to say ultimately is simply that we need really to make a strong decision. And this is already done at European level. This has already been solved. In the Renewable Energy Directive, RED 3 already explains to everyone that storage should not be paying neither double taxes, neither double fees, should either consider as either a generator point or a consumer point and don't pay more than that. But this needs to be implemented. And this lack of cohesive implementation of a directive at European level is not only slowing the development, because some of these directives actually are designed to help the development of storage facilities, but it's actually hindering competition and creating even more problem to operators and developers to justify their business model, to sit in front of a financiers, a debt provider saying, I need my funds, but I'm sitting on the wrong side of the fence. I hope this clarifies the...
Thank you, Matteo. We have time for another question, or?
Grazie. Parlo in italiano perché non mi fido del mio inglese.
Vai, tranquillo.
No, la domanda è questa, parto da una considerazione. Credo che uno dei peccati e dei temi che stiamo discutendo nasce da una situazione originale, detta in termini brutali. In Italia, a partire dal 2000 e qualcosa, 2002-2003, sono state incentivate tutte le fonti, forse anche qualcuna non rinnovabile. Se c'è una fonte su cui non abbiamo mai messo un euro è il pompaggio. Questo è un dato di fatto.
Siamo stati definiti maturi e quindi abbiamo tagliato praticamente tutto.
Esattamente. Peccato che il tema dei pompaggi è un tema che temporalmente richiede evidentemente una lungimiranza che non è paragonabile a quella del BES, no? Evidentemente degli accumuli. Quindi questo è secondo me un elemento che ha condizionato molto l'atteggiamento anche di tutti gli attori. La domanda che volevo fare era se qualcuno ha qualche visione invece su quello che è successo e quello che si sta prospettando sul tema dei pompaggi negli altri paesi europei. Cioè se siamo, come dire, tendenzialmente in linea con gli altri o se, come è successo sino ad oggi, invece stiamo seguendo e perseguendo una strada evidentemente diversa, quindi con tutte le difficoltà nel mettere poi a terra le cose nel futuro. Ecco.
Matteo, direi...
I'd be happy to leave
Leonardo?
the floor to anyone else who has some ideas on that. My views is, and I speak from my IHA perspective, we were extremely excited when the MAXA came out, saying, look, some European countries on a member state level taking action to support batteries, yeah, they always do, they need to do, but also pump storage, because they always mention pompaggi from the beginning in that. So we were all greatly excited. And we thought would have been much faster. We would have, our initial idea was probably right now we would have seen an auction for pump storage, but it's not the case. Hopefully next year, at least that's what the minister, in the ministries they say. We were speaking with some of the director level in the Ministry of Energy, and they were saying next year. Let's see. Next year always feel like something. Yeah, come back later. Don't disturb me now. We will see. European level. I think countries that are moving very well forwards on this topic in Europe, and I say Europe, not EU, is certainly UK. The UK has now approved 4 or 5 projects actually, pre-selected, not awarded, pre-selected pump storage project for a possible support through a cap and floor mechanism. And later we can discuss what's the difference if you want, but it's similar. Again, it provides long-term revenue visibility. Spain is also close to start something very similar with MAXE, which again stands as a capacity mechanism, means I'll pay you for the next 20 years if I know that during those moments of the day, you will be capable of supporting the system. Which I don't think personally is the best way to promote pump storage, but again, this is really on a personal level and we can discuss more later. But we see that happening in Spain. Austria is moving forward very well, but mostly because there are very interesting economic conditions. The case before, maybe I should have not said Austria to explain the case study, but actually they have exposure to the German market, which is one of the markets that has the highest penetration of negative hours. And that obviously calls for long duration electricity storage. It's easier to sit in front of a financier, means a bank, and tell them why they should finance you instead of a data center that could be sitting 100 kilometers from you. Because you have a good call on the market there. It's an extreme situation, the one of Germany. Unfortunately, we know France is thinking of moving into the direction of a dedicated scheme for pump storage, but this is again on a pre-announced level, corridor briefing. Next year we should get more clarity, hopefully. But that's it. Frankly, that's it. There is not much more than that. And it's worrying. Maybe it's worrying the fact that Italy looks so advanced from outside. when we look at it from the inside the glass, we feel everything is stuck, because actually it's stuck, but that's a bit worrying, I would say. Especially, as I said before, when we think China, the greatest battery technology exporter in the world, they own the supply chain. They install at home pump storage. Europe, the largest equipment supplier and consulting provider, or in terms of engineering provider, in terms of hydropower and pump storage, choosing to install batteries. I find it very funny, honestly. It's the way politics work. But
I think the problem in Italy is the renewal of concession. Without solving that issue, we are not. You can have the max, whatever, but we are not able to go further. Just okay. The last one.
Un'ulteriore complessità in Italia è che certe materie sono affidate alle regioni, no? Quando diceva Ezio, da una parte a livello nazionale fai una gara su della potenza, è uguale che siano batterie o pompaggi, no? Dal punto di vista di Terna non c'è privilegio, no? Noi ci diciamo come impatto ambientale è ben diverso una batteria da un pompaggio. No? E tempi diversi di realizzazione, però poi in realtà dal punto di vista della gara è uguale, no? Quindi costa anche meno, ok? Quindi questo è già un... Poi per arrivare appunto a fare un impianto, io non ne devo discutere, cioè i posti dove fare un impianto sono pochi, alcuni ci diciamo che servirebbero nel sud Italia, no? Servirebbero in Molise, in Calabria, in posti baricentrici sulla rete. Non sono come un impianto solare che li posso fare ovunque, li posso fare solo in alcuni posti dove c'è una geografia e un sistema energetico che accoglie questa energia. Ma poi, quando io proponente vado a discutere col territorio, ne discuto come ne parlassi come fare una fabbrica. Non è un'esigenza strategica nazionale. Non c'è qualcuno a livello nazionale, l'Austria, la Cina, la Francia, che decide lì. Quei 3 impianti che sono da fare lì e non là o qui. No? Quindi, però io ne vado a discutere con la regione Molise e alla regione Molise non interessa un fico l'impianto strategico a livello nazionale, perché autorizzare un impianto sul territorio crea opposizioni. Alla regione Molise non ha nessun vantaggio ad autorizzarti un impianto, ha solo fastidi a livello elettorale, no? Non c'è nessuno che a livello nazionale gli dice no, lo devo fare lì perché lì è un interesse nazionale, no? Quindi qualsiasi ente locale, che poi è quello che ti autorizza, non ha nessun interesse a autorizzarti l'impianto, ti farà la guerra. O anche usando bacini esistenti, perché noi abbiamo provato a fare immaginare impianti di pompaggio fra bacini esistenti. E quindi, siccome non c'è interesse a livello locale, gli argomenti sono la qualsiasi. Perché un lago che oscillava in un modo adesso oscillerà in un altro. No? Quindi, se non è un interesse nazionale, e chi è che deve dire interesse nazionale? Terna, GSE? Ma deve dire no, a me serve 1000 megawatt nelle Marche, ok? Ma se non interessa, se nessuno a livello nazionale dice che serve lì, perché non lo posso fare là, lo devo fare lì dove c'è la geografia, no? E poi io devo andare a convincere l'inviluppo dei massimi, no? Come facciamo a superare questo tipo di difficoltà?
Yes.
Quindi un operatore si stanca anche di provarci, no? E dicevo, anche se ci ha provato, diceva, non ci arriverò. Poi c'è anche questo tema delle concessioni, no? Quindi è una montagna da superare.
Yes, that's true that we should have a national vision, not a regional one. And Terna must support us in having this national vision. You're right. So time is over. Thank you very much to all the speakers for the high level of its presentation. And before leaving, I would like to ask you to take a picture just for social activities. I know that AP is going to ask me to have a picture of that. So thank you very much for the participation and have a good lunch.